Hello, awesome patrons. I hope you're doing well. We are in October, and this is the artwork of the month for your membership level. Before I get into the video, I'm going to show you what I have done prior to filming because although I'm ashamed to say it, I hadn't arted or I hadn't painted in almost a week. The month of September was super busy. Everybody's birthday fell in the same month, and I had a whole bunch of appointments, and I also needed to do a lot of admin stuff. I've also gone back to school again for my third session. There's a lot of homework, so batch all this up in one cute little package, and I still managed to get everything on time, to get everything out on time, but unfortunately the art suffered. So before I painted the artwork, I needed to practice because I felt I was too rusty. So I pulled out a big sheet of Canson XL. It's a 9x12, and I figured I'm going to fill this up with leaves because this is the theme that I was going for the artwork. And I pushed myself also even further by using this striper brush. It's a brush that I don't use all that often, and I felt that it would be very successful in breaking out that lethargy that I was in. And I had a ton of fun actually painting for fun like this without having to produce something refined, if I can call it that way. Something just for myself is so it's fun, less stress obviously, because although I try not to stress out about the videos, I do. I want to put out content that makes sense and that, you know, I can educate you, or, you know, that you can learn something from it. But this was strictly for fun. I decided to push the record button because I thought it'd be fun for you to watch. I'm going to speed through most of it, but I thought of like breaking it into smaller bits. I have a very great difficulty with words today, but please follow me. But I think it's cool that you get to see the whole thing, even though it's fast forwarded, because at the end also I have discovered how to do a very cool what are they called, fern, with this brush, and I didn't think I could do it. So anyways, yeah, it's just me, like, you know, just messing about or mucking about. That was a very British expression. Mucking about with this brush. I also used a round brush, and I also used another dagger. This one is the liner dagger by, not the one I'm using right now, but the other dagger that I use is by Silver again, but it's the ruby satin line. So yeah, anyways, I just filled up the whole page, and although, you know, parts of it are either overworked or, you know, I was just like goofing around, I like to look at it. I think it's cool. And I know that if I decide to do something with this, meaning, you know, cut it up into smaller portions or whatever, it's, you know, it's something I can play with. Here's that fern. This is, you know, it's funny because I've done I don't know if you see on the left bottom side, you see the two ferns kind of like on their sides. When I was more intentional and wanted to reproduce that fern, the left side was a little bit wonky. I had forgotten how to do it. And I realized that the placement of your paper or whatever substrate you're working on is very important because it will influence your brushstrokes. Anyways, enough about that. Finally, here's the artwork of the month. I started out, okay, so hold on, hold the press. I think I cracked the code. I have cracked the code on what or the steps that I needed to take in order to do a decent bunch of either leaves or florals, because I realized that there was always something wrong during the composition. Let's say I wanted to do a group of flowers and you've got the stems going on and whatnot, and the leaves, blah, blah, blah. I've always started by doing either the flowers or the leaves. And I always came to a problem in the end. And so for this painting, I decided to reverse my method. I started by installing the branches with a pencil. And it helped. It totally helped. Finally, I had a guide as to where I wanted to position the leaves, and I think I'm going to keep on doing that from now on, because although usually when I do flowers, or most of the time, it's very intuitive, but if I have a plan in mind, I'm going to always start with the branches, because it just establishes kind of like a map of where your leaves and your leaves or flowers will go. And so I thought that was genius. I don't know why I hadn't done that before, but I like to, I've noticed that I like to work in reverse. I always go the long way before I figure out the short way and the easier way. I learned that way. What can I say? Okay, so in terms of colors, oh, and by the way, I'm working on bee paper. This is 100% cotton, 140-pound weight. And the colors I'll be using are this simplified palette that I have gotten into the habit of using. I think mixing your own color is so empowering. And here I'm just playing around with the colors that I want to mix. So I usually use like a swatch card or like a remnant piece of watercolor paper, and I just try out my colors together that way. And if you're curious as to what colors that I have used, I will list the supplies below. So here's now the idea for those leaves. I wanted them to not look like a leaf. I know I'm weird. When I hear myself, when I do a final run through of the videos, when I edit after I've finished the voiceover, sometimes I just I shake my head in disbelief because the things that come out of my mouth sometimes. But it's true. What I wanted was a unidentifiable leaf, because that's the style. That's, I guess, my style. I don't know if you can see it that way also, but when I do flowers, they're not real flowers. They're just out of my imagination, and I do love rounder shapes as opposed to slender shapes. So these leaves, these pods, they look like pods right now, are leaves. And I wanted them as translucent as possible without being too pale, because what I wanted to do, this is a whole bunch of exercises, by the way, a bunch of trial and errors on this one. So I would not consider this video a tutorial per se, but I like to share what I experience with. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if I could paint the darker leaves before the lighter leaves and make it believable, or render what I had in mind. And it totally worked, because I was afraid that even the lightest or the lighter leaves that I would overlay on top of these ones, which are supposed to be in the back, I didn't want them to become the front leaves. I hope this all makes sense, but I think that by having the lighter leaf, even if you layer it over a darker one, because they're lighter in color, they will recess to the back. There, that's a much better explanation. So having said this, I wanted to also drop a few colors within the leaves, because fall is a whole bunch of different colors in a leaf. It's totally random. I think I was successful with the two left ones. The one on the right, that might not be noticeable right now, but it turned out to be a little bit muddy when it dried. And watercolors will always dry a little bit lighter. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So what I did is I started with kind of like a the only word it comes to mind is caramel because I'm hungry. But kind of like an amber or ochre color, and then I started dropping a little bit more of that burgundy that I mixed, and then a little bit of the green. And so I let all of this dry. And the reason why you're seeing partial branches painted is because it just helped me gauge where I could position the other ones. So once everything was dry, very important, then I went in and installed the lightest or the lighter leaves, repeating the same process but using a more diluted paint, if you will, which, hence it would keep it a little bit more translucent. But still, both sets of leaves are translucent because you'll see the lightest one as well in the back. Again, I hope this makes sense. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm going to leave you with some music. I'm going to gather my thoughts and I'll be right back. Here you're going to see me struggle with the green. I wanted to also add 2 green leaves with a little bit of brown. I had great difficulty. I'm not sure if I've left the whole footage in because, yeah, see, I go back between mixing or adding more yellow, then adding more blue, then adding this transparent red oxide, which I should have known better, because there's too much red in that color, and I had a green, so that created mud. And then I turned it into this very washed out, almost like olive green or sap green. I don't know what the heck I did, but it wasn't good. So I decided to remix the color, because sometimes you've gone too far and you gotta start from fresh. So that's what I'm doing. Also, I figured out why my third leaf did not work the way I wanted to. When I did the first 2 leaves, I was very mindful in dropping the colors and not overworking them, not moving them around too much. Because when you do that, what happens is you're just taking all of these colors, the green, the ochre, and the burgundy, and you're smushing them all around, and that becomes one flat color. So that's why I don't like the third leaf as much. But in the grand scheme of things, it did not matter too much, because I knew I was going to add some line work with the brush inside all of these leaves. So that's how I was able to bring it back and be happy with the overall picture. So right now what I'm doing is I'm adding green to the stems, also into these lighter leaves, because they're still wet, so that works. And I just wanted to establish the branch before I did the leaves. Now, in retrospect, what I should have done is sketch out those 2 leaves, because one of them is going to go over right there, the center branch, which also has pencil underneath. So I kind of trapped the pencil lines in there. But I was able to figure out how to correct this in the end. So again, there's always a way to fix your mistakes. unless you've gone way, way, way too far. So the leaves are a little bit longer, like these types of leaves are a little bit longer. And then I use the very tip of my brush to add a little bit of a jagged edge around these two. And if you notice, I also took great care in leaving some white showing through. Those leaves, I wanted to have the look of some bug went in there and just started eating at those leaves. Oh my gosh, it sounds so dark. But I think you know what I mean. You know, fall leaves all have, I mean, some of them, most of them will have some holes in them. I almost did another boo-boo there as I was pulling down the sepia color for the branch, and I was getting near that top green leaf. I almost walked the brown into the green that was still wet. It wouldn't have been so dramatic. It would have added, you know, just more variation to the leaf, but I was afraid that it might look as if I had dropped the color, like the continuation of the leaf. So I made sure to stop just before. But yeah, and a brush like this, by the way, it's a number 8, I think. Let me check my notes. Yes, it's a number 8 round. Silver black velvet brushes are not usually my go-to. I really like them. They're fantastic brushes, but the way I usually paint, I prefer the Neptune brushes. But when I have extreme details like this, I love this brush because the tip comes to a super sharp point and it allows me to do very thin lines. So for this painting, that's why I chose this brush. Here's the new addition to my brush family. It is a Liner Petite by Princeton Select, and the size is 20-0. Whatever that means, I don't get that. I mean, 0 is supposed to be nothing. So is this like 20 centimeters under nothing? Is that how they come up with the numbers past 0? I don't know. All I know is that it works really well. It holds quite a bit of water for that size, which I was impressed. I had to reload every lines almost, but I mean, those lines are quite long for such a small brush. It's got a short handle and I love that. The lines I'm adding, by the way, again, to stay within the same category of fictitious leaves, I wanted to add veins, but not really. So those are just purely for patterning sake. Also to kind of like nourish my doodling addiction. I call them doodles because they're not realistic veins. They're gonna go every which way. They're not consistent, and I think it just went well with the style of painting that I'm doing. And you'll see that I was not careful sometimes, and that's okay. I went over the lines and it's all good. I think it just makes the painting a little bit more interesting. One thing I want to say is I was afraid that this video might be too long for you, and if I've lost you, that's fine. And I'm sorry, although if you're gone, you can't hear my apologies. So but for the other ones that are still here, I could have cut this video. I could have cut some parts out, but I thought it would be a good way for you to see the entire process and to see also that I hesitate like everybody else, and also to realize that if you break this project down to achievable steps, it is really not difficult to do this style of painting. So if you're here because you've enjoyed my doodling videos on YouTube, I'm probably talking to the newest members here. Don't be intimidated by these leaves. There, as you can see at the beginning, you don't have to follow any shape in particular. You can do any shapes of blob, put it on a branch. It's a branch of leaves. That's what I'm trying to say. But here, what I like to do on Patreon is show you more experimental stuff. This piece was experimental for me as well. And that's what Patreon allows me to do. It allows me to play around, and hopefully, some of you will be encouraged to try this as well. And by the way, those lines are painted with the same burgundy that I previously mixed. All I did though was to add less water so that they're a tiny bit darker. But because I'm layering over the same color, but that color underneath is super dry, whatever I lay on top will by default be a little bit darker. I wanted the color to be soft. What I could have done is taken a marker, like a black marker, and added those lines. It would have been a little bit easier, but what I wanted to do was to go after this warm and cozy feel. Black, I feel, would have destroyed what I had in my head. Like, it would have made it a little bit too rigid. And all this to say, if you want to try this and you want to doodle in black, I've done it many times before. Totally acceptable, but for this painting, me, myself, and I wanted something a little bit softer, a little bit warmer. So I let those lines dry, very important, and then I did the ones for the smaller or the lighter leaves. And my mind was playing tricks on me because I kept thinking, you have to stop those lines before you hit the spot where the two leaves meet, when in fact it was completely the opposite. Because I was rendering transparency, you're supposed to see the lines of both leaves. So I really had to get that thought out of my head. And for the green leaves at the bottom, I didn't want to add too many lines. I kept them simple because I didn't want them to steal the show. Did you know this? Did you know I was going to do that? You had to know I was going to add gold to this, of course. Especially with the fall colors. I know I say this pretty much about any colors with this pale gold, but fall and gold, almost synonymous, I want to say. I just love it. And I also used this dotting technique to mask the section of the branch that was showing through the green leaf. Remember at the beginning I was talking about that? So I fixed it. Now I went a little weird with the dots because you'll see a little bit further on that I added more dots up top and none past the branch at the bottom, which meant that it somehow moved the whole painting up. It shifted it. And so I was left with this large white space at the bottom. So I needed to cut it. I needed to cut the paper. This started out as being a 6x9, but unfortunately it is now a 6x6 painting, and that's fine. But it looked better. I needed to get rid of that white. I didn't want to add a shadow underneath the branch. I'm not sure why. I was just not feeling it. So we're at the end of this video, thankfully. Not for me. No, I didn't mean it like that. But I know that you're probably tired of hearing me ramble. I just had a lot of things to say about this painting and the process. I'm also going to add a little bit of gold on the branch, on one side of the branches, just to make it look as if it's sun-kissed. I like that word. Anyways, I will be attaching the sketch of this painting because I do give it as a reward for the $2 category as a coloring page, but feel free to use it if you want to practice. I would love to see your take on this painting. So once you've done practicing with my sketch, go off on your own and do your own invented leaves. Add your own colors, have fun with the colors. That could be, I would see this in purples as well. I know I'm crazy, but purples and blues, it could be fun. Like change it up a little bit, see what you can come up with, and feel free to share it in the community. By the way, this is my reward. Like I know I do these videos and stuff for you guys, but My reward is to see your recreations in the community. I absolutely love it. Some members do share, and it's always such a joy for me to look at them. I always get excited. Ooh, have a photo. Ooh, there's a community post. That's so cool. Oh, by the way, did you know that you're supposed to sign your artwork with the same medium that you have used on the piece? I did not know that. I know that I've signed my name sometimes with watercolor, but usually I use a marker. But apparently that's a no-no. I didn't know that. But anyways. And I always write the year. It's not a bad thing apparently, but not everyone does it. I prefer to add the year because when I look through my portfolio, I can tell right away in which year I did the painting, and it's a great way also to see your progress right off the bat, as opposed to having, you know, to turn the page, because you're supposed to write the year also underneath on the reverse side. But if your painting is framed, you can't really tell. Anyways, again, I'm rambling. Please, somebody remove me from this microphone. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and thank you for your amazing support. I feel the love, and it is so gratifying, and you're the reason why I have come this far. That, you know, the reason why I'm still doing these videos is because of you, bar none, and I am so appreciative. So please go and paint, repeat, paint, repeat, paint, repeat. That is my biggest advice. It sounds lame, but that's what it is. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below this post. And I will be seeing you soon. Yes. Thank you, my awesome patrons.